At 6:15 p.m. on January 5, 2008, police received a report of a drowning in an underground lake at Konyudo and Himasaka Kinchiyana, Arai City, Okayama Prefecture. The missing person was Mr. N, a 21-year-old third-year student at Kochi University. He belonged to the university's Academic Exploration Club, and on that day, as part of the club's activities, he headed to the underground lake with other camp members. Unfortunately, he was never found afterward, and this case is still talked about today as an incident full of mysterious and puzzling elements. There are probably quite a few people who have seen images of underground lakes like this, or have heard about the mysterious rumors surrounding them. When I first started researching this case, I often came across videos and articles that emphasized the mysterious aspects, and in December 2023, I made a video with a similar theme. However, after receiving feedback from knowledgeable people, I decided to research the case again. As a result, I felt that leaving the video public could lead to misunderstandings about the facts, so I made it private. I realize this may not make much sense alone, so I'll discuss the case known for its mysterious and puzzling aspects. I will cover the factors behind this reputation and the facts compiled by the National Diet Library and others. By comparing various materials and documents, I would like to thoroughly examine this case. Let me begin by sharing the conclusion I reached from my research. There are no mysterious puzzles in this case. It was simply a tragic accident. For some reason, it is considered a mysterious puzzle. Based on the facts, we can determine that there is nothing suspicious about this case. That's because we have the answer. Let me list the points considered mysterious in this case. 1. N-san is the president of the club she belongs to, and this includes the vice president, she entered with 4 other members. 2. When entering the small temple, they had not submitted the required entry notification. 35 people are in the Himasaka Kanachiyana Western Department. Heading toward the underground lake, Mr. N entered the underground lake alone. It was an unusually cold time in January, and it was unnatural for Mr. N to swim alone with his clothes on. When they heard a voice saying that Mr. N had reached and touched the other side of the underground lake, there were no cries for help, and then his whereabouts became unknown. The remaining members hardly carried out any rescue activities. They also collected all the ropes and other equipment necessary for escape as they returned to the entrance. When an accident like this occurs, normally the department head or deputy holds a press conference in similar cases. But that hasn't happened here. They usually conduct excessive media coverage. The media has remained completely silent on this matter. The names of the president and vice president were removed from the website of the club that Mr. N belongs to after the incident. Later, after the incident, there was a login to Mr. N's Mixi account. His profile was altered, his diary entries were deleted, and the president's name disappeared from his friends list. As you can see, there are many mysteries in this case that are said to be puzzling, and all of them seem to suggest that something suspicious may have happened. For example, the claim that Mr. N swam alone in the underground lake has sparked speculation he was forced to do so due to bullying. Some people even suggest that he may not have gone to the underground lake at all in the first place. They claim Mr. N was killed elsewhere, and the others are hiding the truth together. Furthermore, after the incident, they even logged into Mr. N's social media account to cover it up. There was something they had to do. It is believed the remaining members were responsible. Given all this, it's clear the club president is hiding something, and, along with the members who accompanied him, is involved. Yet, despite everything, most of these mysteries remain unsolved. As it is, speculation began to spread that some powerful force was at work, and quickly brought the case to a close, since it was promptly treated as an accident. This is the general outline of what is known as the Okayama Underground Lake Disappearance Incident Theory. However, in fact, the Wikipedia entry updated in 2021 contains a completely different account of the case. As you all know, Wikipedia is Wikipedia. The question is, how much you can actually trust it. There are problems, yes, there are. However, regarding this matter, the content refers to the Kanachiyana Himasaka Self-Report, created by the Kanachiyana Himasaka Self-Report Committee on January 5, 2008. I checked this report at the National Diet Library. This report will be entrusted to a third party for review. After improving fairness and including many organizations and stakeholders in its creation, there is significant involvement in this matter. It can be considered accurate information. So, what exactly is the content? First of all, during the creation of the report, the main point was not Kochi University, where Mr. N belonged, but Aichi University. Participants in this training camp included not only Kochi University members, where Mr. N belonged, but also people from the Chugoku and Shikoku regions, Exploration Club members from various universities, alumni, and Hamamatsu Caving Club members also joined. From Kochi University, Mr. N and the club president participated. 3 current students and 1 alumnus participated and entered the Himasaka Kanachi Cave. Only Mr. N from Kochi University was a member. Other than that, there were 3 current students from Kagawa University and 1 29-year-old man from the Hamamatsu Caving Club. In other words, the mysterious point is that Mr. N is the president of his club, and it also includes the vice president, i.e., he entered the cave together with the 4 members. Regarding this point, the president of Mr. N's club, Himasaka Kanachi, did not even enter the Kanachi cave. At this point, we can say the theory of the incident is fundamentally wrong. Also, the accident occurred on January 5th. During this training camp, Kanachi Himasaka's Ananyudo was performed twice, and she entered the cave on January 2nd. That's a fact. Along with this, there is a second puzzling point that becomes necessary when entering the small cave. Why was the notification of entering the cave not submitted? Did those camp members enter the cave without submitting the notification? If there are this many people in such a large-scale camp, of course following the rules is a basic premise. Actually, once you know about this Himasaka Kanachi cave, it's surprisingly anticlimactic. But now, submitting an entry notification is mandatory. However, at the time of the accident, it was optional. And furthermore, when entering on January 2nd, a verbal entry report was made to the chief priest of the Himasaka Kanachi Ana Shrine. Also, on January 5th, the day the accident occurred, the chief priest was absent, so no report was made. Given these circumstances, there is no indication that the lack of an entry notification was due to any malicious intent. It would be unreasonable to claim that the entry notification was intentionally not submitted in order to kill Mr. N. The third mystery is that the 5 people were in the Kanachi Ana Western Department of Himasaka. They headed to the underground lake, and Mr. N entered the underground lake alone. And it's unnatural for only one person to swim fully clothed during the cold month of January. Despite having 5 members, including Mr. N, also, it's considered puzzling that only Mr. N entered the underground lake in the middle of winter, but during this training camp, they were supposed to cross the underground lake in the western part. That had become the usual practice. This is also mentioned in the incident theory. However, the background is completely different. According to the report, in 2006, 10 people entered the water and 5 swam, and in 2007, 21 people entered the water and 9 swam. As you can see from the numbers, not everyone swims in the underground lake, and of course, it's not mandatory. Only those who wanted to swim did so. Also, the shape of the underground lake is completely different from the images circulating in public. It's described as egg-shaped, like this image, with a 5-meter drop to the underground lake's surface. That's the commonly seen description. But in reality, it's said that the cave has collapsed debris piled up like stairs down to the water's surface. Also, the underground lake is shallow at first, about knee-deep, and then suddenly becomes much deeper at a certain point. Here's an illustration. I think you can clearly see the difference. I'll talk about this later, but the difference in how we perceive this shape is also quite significant. Now then, let's talk about why only Mr. N ended up swimming on the day of the accident. On that day, they made it to the underground lake. Among the party, the ones who showed interest in swimming in the underground lake were Mr. N and Hamamatsu. There were 2 people, Mr. K from the caving club and Mr. N. But Mr. K, unsure of his swimming, gave up after going a bit further. In contrast, Mr. N said, "It looks like this is impossible for me." He said something like, "If only I had fins or a float, it would be better." While the other members stayed silent, Mr. N also remained quiet. Mr. N reportedly began swimming across the underground lake toward the opposite shore, as the others watched and illuminated his path with their lights. Also, regarding why Mr. N swam during the middle of winter. Actually, in Himasaka, there is usually a pond called Kami no Ike along the way. You can only go that far, and the underground lake is only accessible during this winter's cold water season. In other words, to put it another way, you can only swim in the underground lake during this time of year. That's exactly why this training camp is held during this time of year. Swimming fully clothed in the shunyudo is just one of many leisure activities here, so it's not unusual. First, we reach the underground lake. By that point, your whole body would probably already be soaked, so there's even less reason to take your clothes off. So what happened to Mr. N next? This brings us to mysterious point 5. After he crossed the underground lake and we heard a voice say he touched it, there were no cries for help. He just vanished without a trace. Actually, the details of Mr. N's actions were recorded in the report. Mr. N paused about 2/3 across the underground lake. He turned around, as if to signal to the other members to go back, but then started swimming toward the opposite shore again and made it all the way across. Furthermore, Mr. N was seen by other members sitting on a rock on the opposite shore to rest and then swimming again. However, after that, the other members started discussing how to get back. At that time, they took their eyes off Mr. N. Within a few dozen seconds, Mr. N suddenly disappeared. That's what happened. What's important is the shape of the underground lake. If it were an egg shape as generally imagined, I think you could see the whole area with the light from a flashlight. But in reality, it's believed to have an inward shape, and there were likely many blind spots. And after losing sight of Mr. N, the members called out "Oi" to him several times, and Mr. N also responded with "Oi." After that, the members called out to Mr. N at intervals of 10 to 15 seconds. But after the third time, they called out "Oi" and got a response. There was no further reply from Mr. N. It is presumed that Mr. N was no longer able to respond, was struggling just to breathe, and ended up drowning. In other words, according to these reports, there is no mention of anyone hearing him say "I touched," and Mr. N's whereabouts became unknown. Significant differences from the incident theory exist, even about the actions immediately before. So where exactly did this mystery about him saying "I touched" come from? That is probably the case. It showed up on the 2-channel forum right after the incident. This post is thought to be the source. There were also odd statements, like someone claiming to hear a voice say "I touched," among others. He collected everything and went back. As far as I can tell from the report, this is completely false. That's also stated in the report. According to the report, after an unexpected situation happened to Mr. N, the remaining members immediately began searching and entered the underground lake, desperately looking for Mr. N while shining their lights on the surface of the lake. However, unfortunately, they couldn't see any sign of Mr. N. At that point, they considered searching underwater, but they didn't have the equipment needed for an underwater search, so they had no choice but to give up searching any further. And regarding the theory that this was a crime, some speculate that no one was left behind at the scene to make sure Mr. N was killed. However, when you look at the report, you can see that the actual facts are completely different. The main issue here is the stagnant warm area, which also affected the other members. There was a suggestion to leave 2 people at the scene, while the other 2 escaped and called for help. That's right, but everyone got into the water to search for Mr. N. If they stayed in that condition for a long time, there was a risk of hypothermia and further harm. In other words, they made the tough decision to have everyone return in order to avoid a secondary disaster. Also, in case Mr. N returned, they left a note like this: "To Mr. N, please wait here. Rescue will come." Even though they themselves were also in danger. They left behind a highly moisture-retentive survival sheet. This was later discovered by the search party. They supposedly gathered all the ropes and equipment needed for escape, but the claim is completely false. They decided the materials used on entry would be needed for the later search, So they left everything behind, escape as is. Usually, when an accident like this occurs, the department head or deputy head holds a press conference, but that hasn't happened this time. Also, the media usually conducts excessive interviews and reporting. The media in this prefecture has stayed completely silent. That's what I mean by these points. Actually, in this prefecture, a task force has been set up in response to the accident. The task force assigned roles with media handling given to the Student Support Division of the Academic Affairs Department at Kochi University. The report states that starting the afternoon of January 6th, the day after the accident, T, the person in charge, would handle all media inquiries. It was made clear that students were not to respond to the media at all. T from the Kochi University Student Support Division handled all media inquiries. It means students, including the club president and vice president, couldn't hold a press conference. Also, regarding the point that the media in this prefecture has remained silent, it is because of the history of this case. Since it was unlikely, moderate media coverage was understandable. Mr. 9N belongs to. About the fact that the names of the president and vice president were removed from the club's website based on reports from the time of the accident and announcements by the Metropolitan Police Department. Many threads were created on the internet forum 2channel. Among them, Mr. N belongs to. Someone noticed that the names of the president and vice president had been removed from the club's website. In other words, this point can be considered true. However, the incident, given the situation, what's suggested in the incident theory can be considered. It's not that they erased the name because they had something to hide, but rather because someone went missing. It's possible that the positions of club president and vice president felt like a heavy burden for them. Also, their names were listed on the website. Actually, the president and vice president had already retired from the club just before the accident happened. And by the time of the accident, the next president and vice president had already taken over. That's why their names were removed from the club's website, because the leadership had changed. That's partly why, and from that view, it's natural. Incident theory interprets these events this way. The focus then shifts to whether the club president and vice president were involved in N-san's disappearance. But furthermore, the following points further raise suspicions and add credibility to the incident theory. Number 10. This case. After the incident, there was a login to Mr. N's Mixi account. His profile was altered, and his diary entries were deleted. Furthermore, the manager's name had disappeared from Mr. N's friends list. This mysterious situation is a fact. Because this point is a fact, it is believed that this case spread as a deeply misunderstood incident up to this point. First, let's talk about the changes within Mr. N's account. If we list them, they are as follows. The username was changed, all items were set to private, and all diary entries were deleted or discontinued. He withdrew from the community called Keiba Rengu. Then Haku disappeared from his friends. This disappeared friend, the person named Haku, is the one who first introduced him to the circle's home. Up to the book. Is by By this point, the matter is here. By this point, the matter is here. As for this matter, if it's from Honkin-san's mobile phone, it's possible to log in without entering a password. For example, before Mr. N enters, the cave's interior is naturally out of range, and even before reaching the underground lake, you get soaked. Also, since he planned to swim in the underground lake, a cell phone was even more unnecessary. Also, considering the risk of damage or water exposure, it's possible he left it with someone else. This is just speculation, but that person was also participating in the same training camp. It's not strange that it was the university club president. Also, what if there were shared computers within the club? There's a possibility that someone used the autocomplete password feature to log in from there. That's also possible. Anyway, Mr. N's account wasn't deleted, just tampered with. And moreover, the fact that the name was something that reminded people of the club president actually suggests that this incident wasn't really malicious. If the club president really was involved in Mr. N's disappearance, he wouldn't have gone out of his way to change Mr. N's account name to something that would make people think of himself. Also Mr. N's account. As for deleting it, you need to manually enter the password, so maybe they couldn't do it even if they wanted to. In fact, it was deleted. From Mr. N's diary and the diaries of other circle members, it was a regular thing. They used to have drinking parties inside the cave. These kinds of facts have come to light. However, it seems that these actions were taken to cover up things they thought would be a problem if discovered, or to calm the situation down. But instead, it only fueled the suspicion that a crime had occurred. As a result, that is the current situation. There are other points that are considered mysterious in the theory that this was a criminal case. But here is how I see them. The search activities were called off rather quickly. They were stopped after 10 days. If you look at the overall map of the limestone cave, the Himasaka Kinchi-ana is extremely complex inside, and just reaching the largest underground lake takes about 3 hours one way. But it requires a lot of physical strength, and on top of that, the search activities start from there. That search activity was also difficult, and Mr. N's chances of survival, and especially when you consider the secondary damage, you can't say it's strange. The members' testimonies about the search have changed multiple times. In fact, that's not true at all. Ms. N and the department head were romantically involved. This was rumored amid speculation about the Mixie falsification. There is actually no evidence to indicate such a relationship. What has been revealed from part of Mr. N's deleted diary, as mentioned earlier, is that it was as part of a street circle activity. Turns out they were having a noisy drinking party inside the cave after all. I think they only deleted it to protect themselves. What do you think? So far, I've discussed the comparison between the theory of the incident and the actual facts, and I hope you can see that there are significant differences between the two. So, why did the theory of the Okayama Chite Lake disappearance spread so widely? It was because the theory expanded on the internet forum Tochigi at the time. Also, information referencing the report was posted on Wikipedia. I believe the fact that this happened in 2021 is a major factor. At that time on Tochigi, as soon as this incident occurred, suspicious points were immediately raised, suggesting it was a criminal case. About half a year after the accident occurred in July of the same year, a report on the incident was created. When someone who read the report posted its contents on Tochigi, the general opinion shifted to believing there was no criminal aspect to the case, and things temporarily calmed down. However, in 2012, evidence suggesting it was a criminal case was compiled again. A new post again claimed this case was a crime, not an accident. The theory gained attention, and reports about it emerged between 2020 and 2021. Edits were made to Wikipedia, but it didn't gain much recognition, and that's the situation up to now. Once again, from here on, I'd like to speak in my own words, but I have chosen to keep my identity private. In the video regarding this matter, I proceeded to create a video based on the incident theory, and as a result, I spread incorrect information to everyone who watched the video. I sincerely apologize. And I would also like to express my gratitude to those who pointed out my mistakes. And this time, I want to share accurate information. That is why I created this video. The report is as long as 74 pages, and I have covered it this time. There is also quite a lot besides the content. Detailed information is available on this matter. The report is available in Tokyo and Kyoto. You can view it at the National Diet Library. If you're interested, please feel free to visit. Also, there was someone who kindly explained the details of this matter to me through X. It was a person named the Kiryu. He wrote detailed information and his thoughts based on the report on his blog. I would like to take this opportunity to express my gratitude, as his blog was a great reference for the production of this video. Thanks to the Kiryu and everyone else who pointed out the mistakes, I was able to correct them. Thank you very much. This mistake made me realize once again that I am who I am because of all of you. Thank you so much for always watching my videos. And if you don't mind, I hope you'll continue to support me from now on as well. That's all for now. Thanks for watching. Abe, who shocked the world in 2022, the former prime minister was assassinated during a street speech. That panic sent a huge shock not only to the Japanese people, but to the entire world. That same year, he also earned a living through politics. A certain member of parliament was arrested and indicted as a suspect in a shocking incident. The charge was murder, and the victim was, shockingly, the parliament member's own wife. Until his arrest, he acted as a grieving husband who lost his wife. Why did the culprit, who vowed to be with her, do it? Why did he kill his wife? And how did he spend his days until he was arrested? The Nagano Prefecture Sitting Assembly member wife murder case. On September 26, 2021, just after 6:30 a.m., a sitting member of the Nagano Prefectural Assembly, Daisuke Maruyama, 47, and his wife Nozomi, also 47, were on the first floor of their home and office next to the sake brewery. She was found lying on her back near the safe. It was the victim's son who found Nozomi. When Nozomi was found, she was already not breathing, and her son he called 110 and the police arrived. Unfortunately, Ms. Nozomi was found dead at the scene, and due to the circumstances, homicide is suspected, so a judicial autopsy will be performed. The cause of Ms. Nozomi's death was asphyxiation due to strangulation. It happened sometime between 1:45 a.m. and 3:00 a.m. She is believed to have been murdered. At first, the police believed that an outsider had killed Ms. Nozomi. They treated the case as a murder. An investigation headquarters was established at Shiojiri Police Station. They began the investigation with about 140 officers widely called for information, and worked to apprehend the culprit as soon as possible. However, minimal physical evidence initially made the investigation challenging. Thanks to the police's persistent investigation and local interviews, information slowly surfaced, and eventually, security camera footage. Through analysis, the suspect was narrowed down. The movements of Maruyama's car on the day of the incident. The data from the drive recorder became the decisive factor. On November 28th of the following year, the police decided to proceed with the arrest of Maruyama. Maruyama, who lost his beloved wife and was viewed as a tragic husband, gained public sympathy after the incident. He struggled to accept it, but hoped for any clue to bring resolution. What happened to my wife? Why hasn't the culprit been caught yet? Why did they kill my wife? I want to ask them directly. He expressed his determination to solve the case quickly and voiced his anger toward the culprit through the media. But actually, during that interview, he said that the culprit would be punished somewhere. And there were not a few people who noticed the moment when he showed a suspicious expression. Here are the case details. The incident was discovered on the morning of September 29, 2021. As mentioned earlier, he was the first person to discover it. Her son immediately called the police and Maruyama, the suspect. Nozomi was found collapsed in front of the home safe, and there were footprints on the floor that appeared to have been made by someone entering from outside with their shoes on. However, aside from that, nothing else seemed unusual. There were no broken windows or signs that the room had been ransacked, so there was no evidence of a break-in by the perpetrator. Taking all of this into account, the police investigation is based on the strong assumption that the perpetrator is likely an outsider, and initially focused on that possibility. The investigation didn't focus on Maruyama, the suspect, because they believed the perpetrator was someone from outside. Yes, because he had what you'd call an alibi. He stayed at the assembly hall to attend the prefectural assembly meeting the following day. The testimony stated Maruyama was involved in the incident. It was revealed that on the night of September 28, the day before, he drank alcohol with colleagues and stayed at the assembly hall until around 11:30 p.m. It's about 80 kilometers from the assembly hall in Nagano City to his home in Shiojiri City. If you travel by car for those kilometers, you would use main roads and highways. It takes about an hour, however. On that day, there was no record of the car owned by Maruyama being captured by the N system. And after that, important physical evidence related to the suspect. There were also no testimonies, making the investigation of this case difficult. However, through the police's steady investigation, it became clear that Maruyama had one decisive motive. People said the Maruyama couple had a good relationship. However, it was revealed that Maruyama was having an affair. Furthermore, it is said that this became the cause of trouble over their divorce. At that time, the police obtained footage from a security camera. Through analysis, they gradually narrowed down their investigation and finally broke Maruyama's alibi. The car that Maruyama usually uses was involved in the incident. It became clear from security camera footage on public roads that from the 28th to the early morning of the 29th, Maruyama was driving toward his home in Shiojiri City. According to Maruyama's statement, he drank with a colleague. After that, he stayed at the parliamentary office building the whole time. That's what he said there. The police decided to analyze the driving data and dash cam recordings from Maruyama's car. Surprisingly, that car seemed to avoid the N system. It took more than 2 hours, avoiding main roads and highways. It was found that he traveled about 80 kilometers from the parliamentary office building in Nagano City to his home in Shiojiri City, and then likely returned to the parliamentary office building again. In other words, Maruyama's alibi can no longer be considered an alibi. After parting ways with his colleague, he traveled by car to leave as little evidence as possible, killed his wife, left footprints inside to make it look like a robbery, returned to the parliamentary office building, and the next morning received criticism from his son at the office. Did he pretend nothing happened and act like the grieving husband despite having an affair after years together? He killed his wife, covered it up, and even deceived the public. Suspect Maruyama. After that, suspect Maruyama has continued to deny the charges up to now. However, the crime was premeditated, and the investigation is still ongoing. The unprecedented case of a sitting lawmaker killing his wife and covering it up is extremely shocking. It was sensational, drawing public attention and shocking the entire nation. The investigation is still ongoing, and the motive for the murder. While it may take time to uncover all the details, Maruyama is suspected of killing his wife solely due to the affair. Is not considered to be the only issue. One of the reasons cited is that Maruyama, who was the president of a sake brewing company, was running the business with financial support from his wife's relatives. But the company's management was not going well, and this appears to have caused trouble. Following the arrest of Maruyama, who was a member, the Nagano prefectural branch of the Liberal Democratic Party expelled Maruyama under party rules, according to the branch's Secretary General. The prefectural branch had not anticipated this situation at all and is very confused by it. Although Maruyama has been expelled from the Liberal Democratic Party, he has only been expelled from the party and still holds his position as a Nagano Prefectural Assembly member. Regarding this matter, the Prefectural Branch Secretary General had the following to say: "We will not be requesting his resignation as an Assembly member from the Prefectural Branch. Because he is currently abroad, we have not been able to contact him, so we are monitoring the situation for now." In other words, even after his arrest and indictment, Mr. Maruyama is still a Nagano Prefectural Assembly member. And what this means is that he is still receiving his Assembly member salary. In some local governments, if an Assembly member is arrested or detained, the Assembly member, some places have ordinances allowing salary suspension or reduction. But Nagano Prefecture does not have such an ordinance. Nagano Prefectural Assembly members earn a monthly salary of 813,000 yen plus bonuses. The amount is reportedly between 1.3 and 1.4 million yen. This may be off topic, but should things like this really be accepted in our society? It took over a year to arrest the suspect, and since I can't imagine the culprit, I don't even feel angry. He also talked about things like that. After Maruyama was arrested, it was revealed that he had always been a womanizer. Even after marriage, he still dated multiple women, often going out drinking and visiting places with women. That's right. Additionally, Maruyama's affair partner is reportedly linked to the local Liberal Democratic Party branch. There is also speculation that this person recently got divorced and may have been pressuring him to get married. In any case, there was no reason for Nozomi-san, who was killed, to have her life taken. It was utterly selfish. There is no doubt that it was a crime. He is still denying the crime. I can only hope that the truth about Maruyama will come to light. Lastly, I would like to offer my heartfelt condolences to Nozomi Maruyama, the victim of this case. That's all for today. Thank you for watching. Thank you. It's said that victims of maritime accidents usually float to the surface. They may sink at first, but will float up as they decompose. It is said that the body becomes buoyant in water due to the effects of gases. If the body sinks into very cold water, there may be almost no decomposition at all. But that's the case in cold countries like Russia, for example. In warm countries like Japan, when a body sinks in the sea or a lake, the water temperature isn't very low. Usually, it floats back up in a short amount of time. However, there have been unusual cases in the past. One day, a man suddenly disappeared. Amazingly, his body was found in a lake in Kanagawa Prefecture 14 years later. And that man was a suspect in a murder case, the Shiho Nakano murder case. Around 1:30 a.m. on November 9, 2003, Shiho Nakano was heading home from work in Awaji City, Kanagawa Prefecture. At the time, the 26-year-old was suddenly attacked and killed. The crime scene was where she worked. Ms. Nakano was walking to the parking lot near the restaurant after finishing work when someone who had been lying in wait attacked her. It appears that the suspect suddenly stabbed her in the chest with a knife. Someone heard her scream. The restaurant manager hurried to the parking lot in a panic. But surprisingly, the suspect was still there, and the manager was also attacked and stabbed. After that, the suspect immediately fled, and the two were taken to the hospital. Fortunately, the manager was seriously injured, but his life was not in danger. However, Mr. Nakano was later confirmed dead. Since there were witnesses to the incident, the suspect was quickly identified. That person was someone she worked with. The regular customer at the restaurant was Tadashi Kubota, who was 24 years old at the time. Testimony from those involved made it clear the incident would happen. The fact is that Kubota had been persistently following her around for some time. As a result, the Kanagawa Prefectural Police listed Kubota as a suspect in the case. Shortly after, still in Kanagawa Prefecture, Kubota's car was found near Lake Miyagase, and the police immediately searched the surrounding area. Unfortunately, Kubota himself was not found, and it is believed that he attempted to escape. The scope of the investigation was expanded nationwide, but no information about Kubota was gathered, and time just kept passing by. The case took a sudden turn 14 years after the incident occurred. In August 2017, the investigation was reduced and almost no clues were found. This case suddenly made progress. A car was discovered nearby. A man's body was found in Lake Miyagase, and after about 8 months of examination, it was confirmed the body was Kubota, the suspect. A man walking on a bridge over Lake Miyagase saw a body floating and promptly reported it. Kanagawa Prefectural Police quickly arrived and retrieved it. The body had already decomposed to the point of being skeletal, indicating that a considerable amount of time had passed since death. The body was sent for autopsy, and the details were compared with the National Missing Persons List, and it was discovered that the DNA of this skeletal body matched that of Kubota, the suspect. The body was wearing. In the pocket of Jean-Par, there was a car key belonging to Kubota that was discovered 14 years ago. Kubota's car was found immediately after the incident occurred. Also, based on the condition of the body when it was discovered, the Kanagawa Prefectural Police concluded that he committed suicide by throwing himself into the lake right after the incident. And after that, the case was closed, with suspect Kubota being referred to prosecutors posthumously, as he had died. However, the biggest mystery of this case remains. As I said earlier, why? Why was suspect Kubota's body not discovered for about 14 years? The body was eventually found. According to the man, the body was floating just below the bridge. If the body had been there the whole time, it wouldn't be strange if it had been discovered much earlier. No, you could say it would be strange if it hadn't been discovered. It's presumed that Kubota climbed over the bridge railing and jumped off. However, unlike the sea, Lake Miyagase has almost no water current. It's hard to believe that the body was carried away and moved from another place. So when he jumped, the body simply sank straight down into the water. And after 14 years, when the body floated up to the surface of the lake, it was discovered. Normally, a body should float in water, but in this case, it remained sunk, and it remained submerged for a long time. The fact that the body floated up after 14 years had passed. So how can these things be explained? The most reasonable explanation is probably that he drowned. It's known that bodies tend to float in water, but if the lungs are filled with a large amount of water, the body will sink. However, when the body was found, it was already skeletonized, and there was nothing left in the lungs, not even water. Also, because the body was already skeletonized, it was impossible to determine the cause of his death. The time it takes for a body to decompose underwater varies depending on conditions such as the water temperature. In summer, it may take days, but in winter, it can take months. And when the water depth exceeds 40 meters, the water temperature drops significantly, and decomposition slows down drastically. That's right, this Lake Miyagase has a maximum depth of 138 meters, but the depth at which the body was found has not been made public. But if Kubota's body had sunk to a deep part of this lake, the low-temperature environment might have caused it to take a considerable amount of time before decomposition progressed. If that's the case, it also explains why the body didn't float up right away. However, even if that were true, a body can hardly avoid decomposing for 14 years. In fact, the body that was discovered had been completely reduced to bones due to decomposition and being eaten by aquatic creatures. Put simply, the more logically you consider it, the more likely it happened earlier. It would be strange if the body hadn't floated to the surface of the lake, unless the body was caught on rocks at the bottom of the lake or in a water tank, preventing it from rising to the surface. That possibility can be considered. However, because of this, the victim, Mr. Nakano's family says they were able to find closure. Unfortunately, Mr. Nakano's life will not return. However, he was missing for 14 years. Despite finding Kubota's body, the case is still unsolved. Although the case was not resolved, the fact that the bereaved family was able to find some closure may have been due to some mysterious force at work. I sincerely pray for the soul of Shiho Nakano, who was a victim in this case. Well then, that's all for this time. Thank you for watching. Thank you very much. Dishonest and malicious. A friend can be more harmful than a beast. A beast may harm your body, but a bad friend will wound your soul. These are the words of Buddha, the hierarchy of Buddhism, a murderer who took lives for both sincere and selfish reasons. This person later denied his own malice in court, but it was revealed. That truth wounded not only the victims, but also the souls of their bereaved families. And hearts. The beastly class in Buddhist hierarchy. Even so, a certain perspective. Thank you very much. After further investigation, the body was found to belong to a resident of Atsugi City, Kanagawa Prefecture. Ms. Ayana Yoshida was 26 years old because of the unusual discovery. Police suspected foul play and launched an investigation for body abandonment and conducted a judicial autopsy. As a result, the following facts became clear. The body had been dead for 5 to 10 days, and the estimated time of death was believed to be around late October. The only clothing worn was a t-shirt and underwear. He was not wearing shoes and was barefoot. Multiple injuries that appeared to be caused by being struck with a blunt object were found on the right side of the head. There were small cuts and bruises all over the body. The cause of death was brain contusion with skull fracture due to a blow to the head. Based on these facts, the police concluded that she had been assaulted multiple times by the perpetrator. They indicated they will investigate not only for abandonment of a corpse, but also on suspicion of murder. After that, Yoshida-san, the victim, was last seen late at night on October 27th, which was 9 days before she was found. She said she'd pick up her things from her ex-boyfriends, and after that, her whereabouts were unknown. Her parents then reported her missing to the Seiya police station in Yokohama City. It was revealed that they had filed a missing person report. Furthermore, it was discovered from her social media that Yoshida-san had been troubled by something for some time. That was a stalker. From October until she disappeared, she had been dealing with this. She wrote about her struggles with this on her Facebook. Because of that person, I've been through so much. Seriously, I wish they'd just stop. If you keep harassing me any further, I'll take this to the authorities. The shadow of a stalker. And then she said she was going to see her ex-boyfriend and disappeared. Is her stalker and her ex-boyfriend the same person or not? However, Ms. Yoshida had not consulted the police about this stalking incident. Therefore, at the beginning of the investigation, it was considered possible that the stalker was just one of the suspects. And as they proceeded with the investigation without any preconceived notions, the police showed a cautious attitude. Also, since the bundle of bedding that was found was very large, they considered the possibility that there might be multiple perpetrators. They will gradually gather information, focusing mainly on investigating Yoshida-san's relationships. Meanwhile, the police made a discovery. They started monitoring one individual who had been involved about a month before the incident. He dated Mr. Yoshida until about a month earlier, a construction worker named Seiji Kamioka, who was 34 years old at the time. Actually, this man named Kamioka, he told several media outlets that he was Yoshida's ex-boyfriend and said he would cooperate with the investigation. However, the media aren't stupid. From the beginning, there were quite a few people who suspected that he might be the culprit, and that speculation turned out to be correct. He was the one who killed Mr. Yoshida and abandoned the body. But I think at that time, deep down, he didn't really believe he would get caught. That's because he was completely playing the role of someone worried about her. And that's because he carried out various acts of deception to fool the police. He told the media he was concerned for her and recalled their time together. On the other hand, he was carrying out acts of deception to fool the police and the public. For instance, Yoshida lost contact with her mother. Right after, on October 29th, he posted on Facebook that he couldn't reach her and was worried. He posted a photo with her asking, "If anyone has any information, please let me know." He also spoke like this to the media during interviews. The last time he saw her was on October 26th. "We were together from morning until night, and then I walked her home and said goodbye." And then, expressing his anger, he added that he wants the culprit to come forward immediately. In order to show that his own disappearance and Yoshida-san's were unrelated, he pretended to be genuinely concerned for her when talking to Yoshida-san's parents, who were searching for their daughter. He even helped with the search. As the investigation continued and the task force monitored Kamioka, they initially suspected his involvement. He denied it and questioned their suspicion. He was indignant, questioning why someone desperately searching like him was suspected by police. That's right. But did he gradually start to feel that he couldn't keep deceiving the police? On January 13, 2015, about 2 months after the incident was discovered, Kamioka finally made this statement. There was an issue, and Yoshida-san died. I disposed of the body. He also said that he used a company pickup truck to transport the body, and Yoshida-san's wedding ring was found in that truck. Around the same time, Yoshida-san was also alive. That's right. Seiji Kamioka. It was this person. In Kamioka, he told an acquaintance, I'll let this guy do it. Because I'm kind, I'm quitting. I have a dangerous, murderous urge toward Mr. Yoshida. It was also revealed that he had sent messages expressing murderous intent. 2 days later, on January 15th, Kamioka murdered Mr. Yoshida. They also planned to investigate his involvement. They decided to arrest and indict him on charges of abandoning a corpse. Then the trial for this case began, and what happened to Yoshida on the day of the incident was gradually revealed. The prosecution called defendant Kamioka to testify, and based on the evidence that was found, they reconstructed the sequence of events in this way. On October 26, 2014, as Yoshida-san told her mother, her ex-boyfriend, in other words, she went to Kamio defendant's room to pick up the clothes and other things she had left there. And at this time, the defendant was already thinking about killing her, and they got into an argument in the car while he was driving her. When she got out of the car, he suddenly and seriously struck her on the head and killed her. After that, he wrapped the body tightly in a futon and transported it by car to the Sagami River. The defense, led by Ueoka, argued the defendant lacked intent to kill or commit murder. They claimed that the act was in self-defense and argue for the defendant's innocence. It was Yoshida who attacked first. He said that the only way to protect his own life was to fight back. But later in the trial, a shocking truth will be revealed. That is, out of the 5 blows to the head that Yoshida received, at least 2 times his head was held in place. It was revealed from the autopsy results that he was struck with considerable force while his head was being held. Yes, it means he was struck while his head was pressed against a car or the ground. Additionally, the relationship between the defendant and Yoshida-san was revealed. The two had been in a relationship for about 2 years. Before they broke up, they were living together. However, this person, Ueoka, was actually a married man with a wife and children. He said, I'll get divorced soon. You're the only one I love. However, Ms. Yoshida began to distrust him, because he only talked and never took action. And then, on the day of the summer festival in 2014, after he became violent while drunk, that incident led to the end of their relationship in September of the following year. However, Kamioka continued to obsess over Ms. Yoshida and stalked her even after that. Then, on October 26, he committed the incident. The second half of the trial was held at the Yokohama District Court on March 25, 2016. In this prefecture's lay judge trial, the presiding judge rejected the defense's self-defense claim. The prosecution demanded 20 years in prison, claiming it was a one-sided and unnecessary attack. But the court sentenced the defendant, Ueoka, to 18 years in prison. Yes, a sincere but malicious friend is more harmful than a beast. After the arrest of the suspect, Mr. Yoshida's parents released the following comment through their lawyer. I feel betrayed when I think that everything he did to help search with us was just part of his cover-up. That's exactly how I feel. Even while grieving deeply over the loss of my precious daughter, I still worry about them. He appeared as a sincere and well-intentioned friend, however. What was on his mind was only how to cover up the crime or how to clear suspicion from himself. Just schemes to disguise his actions. He betrayed his parents, who were in the depths of despair, in the worst possible way. Truly, everything was for his own convenience. Utterly selfish. There is absolutely no room for sympathy for his crime. I sincerely pray for the soul of Ms. Ayana Yoshida, who was the victim in this case. Well then, that's all for today. Thank you for watching until the end. Thank you very much. When an accident or incident occurs, there is usually some kind of trace or evidence left at the scene. And eyewitness accounts are also a very powerful tool, and it's not uncommon for information from witnesses to lead to the arrest of the perpetrator. Can we notice those small but certain facts, piece them together, and connect them to the perpetrator? If it's people who commit crimes, then it's also people who solve them. This time, I'd like to introduce a case where the determination of a single police officer led to its resolution. Tochigi Prefecture housewife hit-and-run incident. On June 26, 1970, on a road in Tochigi Prefecture, a 45-year-old woman at the time, Ms. A housewife from Yokohama City, Kanagawa Prefecture, was found collapsed. She was rushed to the hospital but pronounced dead. Autopsy results showed it was found that she had suffered a strong impact all over her body, and it was believed that she died after being hit by a car. Her most visible injuries were a fractured rib and a wound on the right side of her head, but her back and legs were uninjured. Witnesses said she was lying on the ground. A black vehicle was seen nearby and sped away quickly. She visited Tochigi Prefecture, where her husband's parents live. It appears that she was involved in the accident when she came to visit. The police believe she was hit from behind by a car speeding toward her. The investigation assumes she was hit in a hit-and-run, and over 300 black sedans are being checked. They are interviewing local residents. However, there has been no progress in the case, and 2 years have passed. In June 1972, it happened near a town in Tochigi Prefecture. Sergeant Shiraishi of the Tochigi police station, who was investigating a theft case, had moved into the victim's house. He moved into the victim's house with 2,000 yen. The funds were 4,440 yen, and the goods were worth 4 billion yen. The funds were 44 billion yen. The funds will be 44 billion yen, and the funds will be set to 440 yen. It seems the police treated it as a hit and run, but there's a rumor going around that it wasn't an accident, but murder. Among the local residents, there's a rumor that the husband is suspicious. It's just a rumor, but where there's smoke, there's fire. Is it a detective's intuition? Sergeant Shiraishi went back to the station and walked to the dusty traffic division records room. He got his hands on the investigation files for this case. He looked through the investigation materials for the traffic accident that happened 2 years ago and investigated for a while, but he couldn't find a single piece of evidence. After that, he ended up investigating another case. 2 more years went by, but he still felt uneasy. With that discomfort, he looked through the files again. Looking at the photo of the body, he realized what had been bothering him. The files state she was hit from behind by a passing car, but there were no noticeable injuries on her back, and her legs were also unscathed. This wasn't a hit and run. He continued secretly investigating the case while handling other investigations. He began his investigation by checking her husband's background, rumored to be suspicious. He got the husband's family register, confirming she lived there the night of the incident. He headed to Yokohama and, determined to thoroughly investigate, devoted all his personal time and even covered all travel and other expenses out of his own pocket, pouring everything into this case. Through his investigation and input from local residents, he found 3 things. The husband ran an ironworks, but it didn't go well and he went bankrupt. Soon after she passed away, his finances suddenly improved. When she passed away, all she owned were cosmetics and toiletries, despite coming all the way from Yokohama to Tochigi. It was extremely puzzling that she didn't have a wallet. There were small rumors leaked by victims of minor thefts. Sensing something suspicious and noticing strange occurrences, Jitsu started investigating. After months, finally, he visited an important person. That was his father-in-law and his husband's younger brother, who lived with their parents. When he heard the story, he learned Ms. A never visited the father alone. She always came with her husband. After hearing this, he was convinced it was murder, not an accident. They watched a movie, ate Odin at a food stall, then went home. He believes the questioning happened around 2 a.m. She told another officer what happened and discussed her actions that day. However, it turned out that this was a lie. Her husband said he saw something on that day. It turned out that the movie was not being shown on that day. However, this only proves that she did not watch the movie. It doesn't directly connect to her death, but her alibi was broken. He then presents his husband with undeniable evidence. On the night of the accident, you gave it to your lover to wash. When we had the clothes examined, they showed a luminol reaction. Through his relentless investigation, he uncovered the husband's affair and obtained evidence. On the way back, I got blood on me. I got the clothes because I loved you. She and he came. He came home. After that, the husband left the scene of the crime. We headed together to a place I was familiar with. I forcibly dragged them out of the car and prepared. I struck him on the head with a crowbar, then put the woman in their car while he was still breathing. He said he ran over them 2 or 3 more times and then left the scene. It all happened in just over 20 minutes after he turned himself in at the police station. The insurance payout was 12 million yen. It was a staged incident. He confessed everything, that he was driving a black sedan at the time, and that after a while, he switched to a red car to destroy the evidence. That's right, just let me know. It's for my wife. I won't hesitate to cooperate. Those were his parting words. The despicable criminal was sentenced to life imprisonment. He is still serving his time behind bars. The perfect crime was uncovered. Sergeant Shiraishi received the Superintendent General's Award 3 times before he retired. His achievements were recognized by His Majesty the Emperor, and he was awarded the Order of Merit. He was called a legendary detective of the Showa era. He passed away in 2000 at the age of 83. The belief he left behind was this: what's important is, first, your feet, and second, your ears. I hope there will be more police officers like Sergeant Shiraishi. That's all for today. Thanks for watching. Thank you. This is sudden, but if someone asked, what kind of meat is chicken? Could you answer? I tend to. Recently, I had the opportunity to eat crocodile meat. Of course, I knew it was crocodile meat. Since the meat still had reptile-like skin with claws on it, I ate it without any doubt, knowing it was crocodile meat. But I was really surprised at how much it tasted like chicken. I've also eaten frog meat in the past, and that tasted just like chicken too. If someone told me this was chicken and served me these meats, I probably wouldn't have doubted it and would have eaten them as chicken. Changing the subject a bit, what methods do you use to get information? For example, about science, history, the Earth's environment, or world affairs. For news and world events, I think about 90% of people use television, social media, or the internet. All kinds of information are spread through news and broadcasts, and the tools we use to get that information, like TVs and computers. Most people don't consider how TVs show images. As long as you can use the television, lack of knowledge isn't a problem. That's the point of convenience. When an incident occurs, most people can see it. They watch and listen to the information and believe that the truth of the incident is just as reported. That's what they believe. However, if even that doesn't exist, then this time there is almost no information or clues. Only the body was found, and for many years, not even the identity was known. However, in recent years, I will cover a certain case that was reported to have made progress. A new incident that is causing a stir in society. Is that really the truth? Or is it something else? The Biwako Babara murder case. On May 17, 2008, a fisherman at Okayama Park in Omihachiman City, Shiga Prefecture, was found floating in Lake Biwa. He found a human right foot and notified Shiga Prefectural Police. Investigators quickly arrived at the scene. The right leg was found from the thigh to the shin, but the foot from the ankle down was missing. This was not the only part of the body that was discovered. That same day, investigators found the person's left leg at another location. Like the right leg, it was thigh to shin, missing the foot below the ankle. And then, about a month later, on June 23, more parts of the same person's body were discovered one after another. Shiga Prefectural Police determined the cause of death was asphyxiation from strangulation. It's believed the person was killed and then dismembered. A special investigation unit was established at Omihachiman Police Station to investigate murder and corpse abandonment. However, the investigation faced difficulties from the start, and even basic tasks were challenging. This was because the body's identity was unknown, and there were almost no eyewitnesses. First of all, without identifying the body, they couldn't move on to steps like questioning people or conducting interviews. Time just kept passing by, and this case was gradually being forgotten. In the end, the identity was finally discovered in 2018, a full 10 years after the incident occurred. Police identified the victim as Hideyuki Kawamoto from Anshi, Shiga Prefecture, by checking missing persons who hadn't renewed their driver's licenses. Hideyuki Kawamoto's name came up 2 years ago. They then did DNA tests and interviewed his relatives. The body's physical and facial features matched. The police are asking the public for more information based on the identified individual. In September 2019, a special investigation reward was offered. The 3 million yen reward period will be extended by 1 year. However, no information that could lead to a resolution has been gathered. In September 2020, the reward period ended without extension. While the victim has been identified, the case is still unsolved. But still, why? Why was the identity of the body unknown for such a long time? To get closer to answering that question, let's take a detailed look at what happened after the incident. First, let's summarize how the dismembered body was discovered. Let's look at the date, time, and location where each part of the body was found, as well as the condition in which they were discovered, in chronological order. Here it is. The display lasts 5 seconds, so pause if you need more time. With these discoveries, the facts are gradually becoming clearer. First, when part of the left leg was discovered, it was found that someone had dismembered the body. When the head was found, it was described as heavy and long, with a large 1 centimeter white patch mixed with gray hair on the upper left cheek and 4 missing front teeth. As the victim's facial and physical characteristics became clear, it was discovered that the neck had been cut with a sharp blade. There were signs of internal bleeding, characteristic of death by asphyxiation, and that the victim had been strangled to death by someone before being dismembered. Furthermore, according to a report on May 29, 2008, the cause of death and other details about the victim were revealed. The physical characteristics were slightly overweight, blood type O, and 26 centimeters shoe size. The estimated time of death was announced as late April to early May. By late June 2008, 6 cases occurred in several locations in Shiga Prefecture. After body parts were found, police intensified their investigation and reconstructed the remains in July. Based on the composite sketch, 10,000 posters were made to urgently call for information from the public. The front 4 incisors are missing. Regarding the punishment, death is the penalty. The punishment is imposed. The punishment is the harm. The punishment is imposed as the harm. Death as punishment is imposed on the offender. Death as punishment concerns the victim. Death as punishment is about the victim. Narrow it down and create a list of missing persons. It was an enormous task to match the characteristics of each and every body with the list. In addition to this work, the time required for identification, including DNA testing with selected missing persons and interviews with their families, was certainly extraordinary. After over 10 years, identification was finally achieved. But this is only the start of the investigation. And then, the identification of the victim and the facts that later became clear revealed that the identity of the victim in this case had remained unknown for over 10 years. What caused even more of a stir in society than the mystery of not knowing was the shocking fact that the victim was... It was discovered that Mr. Kawamoto was acquainted with the suspect in another murder, corpse abandonment, and body mutilation case. Coincidentally, Mr. Kawamoto's identity was revealed. In 2018, another dismemberment murder case occurred in Shiga Prefecture. I'll skip the details. But in August 2018, he was found floating face down in an agricultural waterway. A passerby discovered the torso of a man. This case quickly led to the apprehension of a suspect. The victim was a man in his 60s named Mr. Nakagawa. The sexual incident happened in early August 2018. A month later, Mr. Nakagawa and money. There was trouble involving money. Another man in his 60s has been arrested and charged as a suspect. Tomoyoshi Yuzurihata, the defendant, formerly ran a yakiniku restaurant in Moriyama City, Shiga Prefecture. This man with this unusual last name is actually a beauty lover. He says he knew Mr. Kawamoto, the victim of the murder case. This shocking fact was reported simultaneously by various media outlets in December 2018. It was just 1 month after Mr. Kawamoto's identity was revealed. Defendant Yuzurihata met Mr. Kawamoto when they worked at the same construction site in the past. That's how they got to know each other. Surprisingly, Mr. Nakagawa was also killed in the agricultural waterway. He also met him when he was working at the construction company. Mr. Nakagawa, who was killed, had his house managed by defendant Yuzurihara. It was found that although Yuzurihara managed all his pension and finances, the rent was overdue, indicating embezzlement by Yuzurihara. This led to a financial dispute, including for Mr. Kawamoto. the victim in this case. Mr. Yuzurihara also had issues with borrowing and lending money. He was repeatedly assaulted by Mr. Yuzurihara. That's right. Are these facts just coincidence? Also, Mr. Yuzurihara ran a business. The Yakiniku restaurant, this very establishment, was the scene of Mr. Nakagawa's murder and dismemberment. They found something in his home's drainpipe that belonged to neither Mr. Kawamoto nor Mr. Nakagawa. Fragments of human bone were discovered. And this Yakiniku restaurant had become famous for something strange. That is, there were days when the meat tasted abnormally bad. I'll leave it to your imagination what I'm trying to say. Yuzuriha was ultimately involved in Mr. Nakagawa's 2014 case. In December 2019, he received a 25-year sentence and appealed. On February 20th, 2021, the appeal was denied, and the 25-year sentence became final. Are the two cases really connected, or is there actually a different real culprit in this case? And was the chicken really chicken? Well then, that's all for this time. Thank you for watching. Thank you very much. Do you ever lie or force yourself to pretend to be something you're not? Sometimes those things are important and necessary. However, that's only because both sides care about each other. Depending on the person and the situation, you might end up losing yourself beyond repair. You could literally lock yourself in a prison. That could be the result. This time, I fell in love with a detective. As a result, during the interrogation, I told a lie that was disadvantageous to myself. This is about someone who spent 12 years in prison after the Kinen Hospital incident in Shiga Prefecture, where they were hospitalized. In a vegetative state, unable to sustain life without a ventilator, a 72-year-old male patient was found in cardiopulmonary arrest. He was found by the nurse on duty, not the previously mentioned one. The assistant confessed that he had removed the patient's ventilator tube. As a result, he was arrested. The person who was arrested was Mika Nishiyama. She was 24 years old at the time. She was tried for removing the ventilator out of love and later pleaded not guilty, but was still sentenced to 12 years in prison, with the sentence finalized. She would serve 12 years in prison. However, 15 years after the incident occurred, after her repeated appeals, a retrial was held. As a result, she was found not guilty. Why? She made a false confession. Why did she have to spend 12 years in prison? What was revealed in the background was her innocence and the dirty investigation that took advantage of it. At first, he was artificial. Because he couldn't survive without a respirator, it was determined that the hospital was at fault for not noticing when, for some reason, the respirator was removed. There was testimony that Mr. A's respirator had come off in the background. However, Mr. A had something he was keeping secret. In fact, he had passed away. The male patient required routine assistance every 2 hours. But that day, Mr. A only received assistance up until 11 p.m. Believing the man died due to his own negligence in allowing phlegm buildup, he lied, claiming the ventilator had come off. That seems to be highly likely. The police, unaware of this, proceed to interrogate the two of them. The ventilator was designed to sound an alarm if it became detached, but both Mr. A and Mr. Nishiyama said that the alarm did not go off. They claimed that the accident was caused by a malfunction. After that, the investigation made no progress, and voluntary questioning continued one after another. During the investigation, Mr. Nishiyama attempted suicide and was hospitalized, temporarily suspending the investigation. About a year after the man's death in May 2004, the investigation was resumed. At the same time, the police officer in charge of the investigation was replaced. From there, this case would head in a direction that should never have happened. Detective Yamamoto, a detective in his 30s from the prefectural police headquarters, banged on the desk during interrogation, insisting Mr. Nishiyama must have heard the sound and threatened him with intense pressure. And he forced a false confession. Then, everything changed completely from how it had been before. Detective Yamamoto suddenly became gentle and comforted Mr. Nishiyama. It must have been hard to keep quiet, must have been painful. You had no experience dating men. Mr. Nishiyama began to develop feelings for Detective Yamamoto. As an additional note, Mr. Nishiyama has a mild intellectual disability and has been diagnosed with the intelligence of a 9 to 12-year-old. However, in that case, the person in charge has a tough responsibility. It's Ms. A driven into a corner by her confession. Ms. A eventually suffered a nervous breakdown. When Mr. Nishiyama heard about this, she was overwhelmed with guilt. She immediately asked Detective Yamamoto to withdraw her confession, but he wouldn't listen. If Ms. A single mother, were arrested, she couldn't earn a living. With that mindset, she made a surprising statement to try to change things. I removed the breathing tube. She did it to help Ms. A because she had pushed her into that situation. This matches the original testimony that the breathing tube had come off. It all fits together. She ended up making the worst possible false confession, that the breathing tube had come off. Even though it wasn't even certain, Detective Yamamoto and the prefectural police were convinced by the unexpected confession. On July 6, 2004, they arrested Nishiyama-san and shifted their focus toward charging her with murder. Nishiyama-san pleaded her innocence to the lawyer who visited her. But during police questioning, she was made to confess to the crime. Nishiyama-san later said that she wanted to be helpful to the person she liked and wanted to be liked by them. Detective Yamamoto knew this, so he didn't let any female officers into the interrogation room. He was alone with Nishiyama-san, and even when he held her hand, she didn't refuse. The organization took advantage of her feelings of love and affection to create a written statement. A confession was prepared as instructed. The prosecutor finalized the contents of her confession and proceeded to indict her for murder. Ultimately, it was a false statement. Unnatural aspects remained, and the key respirator was still missing even after the confession. Yama-san, after all that effort, Yama-san is talking about those feelings he had afterwards. Did it happen afterwards? I'm focusing on how I turned off the alarm sound. Of course, even though nursing assistants aren't qualified to handle respiratory equipment, Mr. Nishiyama couldn't possibly have known about such a mechanism. I think you can understand what happened to her without me saying it. Then, on November 29, 2005 at the Utsuchi Festival, the trial for this case will be held. I didn't expect this outcome. She desperately insists on her innocence. However, unfortunately, at the Utsuchi Festival, only those who were actually there can speak about her confession. They fully believed in its credibility and sentenced her to 12 years in prison without parole for murder. The sentence was finalized on May 21, 2007. She continued to claim her innocence from prison, but her latest first appeal was rejected by the Utsuchi court, and so she spent more than 10 years of her life in prison, from her 20s to her 30s. On August 24, 2017, she was released after completing her sentence. After her release, she filed a second appeal in search of the truth. And then, in December 2017, the Osaka High Court found that there had been guidance from the police officers in this case, and that her statements were made according to that guidance. There was a possibility. And finally, the court accepted the new evidence. This was the result of the latest appeal. The court made these facts public. She was in a vegetative state. It is highly likely that the man died of a fatal arrhythmia, in other words, a natural death. The prefectural police hadn't submitted 117 pieces of evidence to the Otsu District Public Prosecutor's Office. Among them was evidence that the respirator had not been removed. There was also her own handwritten statement. The police hid all evidence that contradicted the claim that she was the perpetrator. This case isn't an incident or accident. It was fabricated by police and prosecutors. Her defense attorney, Mr. Ido, stated clearly at the press conference. Then came March 30, 2020.
Yes.
where she connected with her partner that day. Rumors suggest a former Mafia female spy was involved in President Daito's murder. Based on everything so far, the profile of the culprit would be someone who is well-versed in the underworld. It could be someone who holds a grudge against Osho Food Service or President Daito personally, and who would benefit from his absence. At first glance, it might be someone who seems unrelated, or even someone who admired President Daito. Kyoto Prefectural Police are still collecting information on the case. The mysterious murder of President Daito, who achieved success through his own efforts. It's best if such incidents never happen. However, regretting what has already occurred, but time that has passed, above all, President Daito will not come back. They say the case could go cold unless it's solved soon. I sincerely hope that this tragedy will come to an end soon. My deepest condolences for Takayuki Daito's passing. That's all for today. Thank you for watching. Thank you. Have you heard of the ambush Donfa, ladies? He got 3 billion yen from around 4,000 beautiful women. He claimed he made money just to sleep with women, and his bold remarks made him the talk of the town. That kind of person suddenly started something. The mystery of the incident still hasn't been solved, and the truth remains shrouded in darkness. So, what exactly happened to him? The surprise attack Donfan incident on May 24, 2018 in Tanabe City, Wakayama Prefecture, Kosuki no Saki. The surprise attack Donfan, age 77, was found dead at home. He ran several companies. His assets were said to be worth between 3 billion and 5 billion yen. The autopsy revealed that the cause of death was acute stimulant poisoning. Even though he had no connection to stimulants during his lifetime, he was found like this. There were no signs of an intruder in his home. At that time, the only people present were the housekeeper and his new wife, Ms. S., who was 55 years younger. Then suddenly, an unverified will surfaced, causing a major commotion across Japan. So, where does the truth of this case really lie? Now, here are the details of the incident. Around 4 p.m. on May 24, 2018, Mr. Nozaki watched sumo on television upstairs, then drank beer in the downstairs living room around 6 p.m. The housekeeper had already prepared some food. He ignored the udon, left Ms. S. in the living room, and went upstairs alone. Around 7:30, the housekeeper finished her errands and returned home. At 8 o'clock, footsteps were heard from his second-floor bedroom. The housekeeper and Ms. S. exchanged words, saying, "He's still awake, isn't he?" Then, around 10 p.m., they casually went to check on him. Ms. S. found him already dead on the sofa in the bedroom. Ms. S. quickly told the housekeeper and called an ambulance right away. The housekeeper, shocked, called out for the president and hugged him, but he was already dead. His body was cold. They performed chest compressions, as instructed by the paramedics, but it had no effect. The circumstances of his death were also unclear. His body was sent for autopsy, and then a shocking fact was revealed. Amazingly, stimulants were detected in his stomach and blood. There were no injection marks on his arms or elsewhere, and no one around him testified that he regularly used stimulants. Since there was little solid matter in his stomach, it was determined he died from ingesting a large amount of stimulants. It's hard to believe that he took them of his own will. Given the situation, who could have made him take so many stimulants? There were about 40 around his house. Security cameras had been installed. The police immediately checked these, but none of the security cameras showed any suspicious individuals. So, what does this mean? It means that it's highly likely the crime was committed by someone who was in the house. Given the situation, many speculated the wife killed him for the inheritance, but nothing has been proven. The truth is still unknown. About 2 weeks after the incident, on June 7th, the police focused on the fact that his beloved dog, Eve-chan, had died on May 6th, just before the incident occurred. If stimulants were detected in his beloved dog, it would help narrow down the suspect who gave him the drugs. That was their reasoning. However, no stimulants were detected in Eve-chan. The people who were at home are suspicious. That's what they said. The investigation stalled, leaving only suspicion. Amid this, an obvious theory emerged. It's the inheritance issue. With no progress in the investigation, around the time when television and newspaper coverage started to die down, there was suddenly a commotion about a will being discovered. Neither Mr. S., the housekeeper, nor any siblings brought out the will. The person was an executive at Apricot and a law office clerk in Tokyo. The word will appeared in hiragana. The contents of that will were astonishing. It said all his personal assets would go to Mr. Tanabe after his death. According to this clerk, the will was delivered by him around February 2013. Then, 2 weeks after his death, the clerk remembered the will and wrote "will" on it. He submitted the envelope with the will and his seal registration certificate to Mr. Tanabe's family court. The relatives strongly objected, even though the will left the donation to Mr. Tanabe. Since S, the spouse, is entitled to a reserved portion, half of the inheritance will be distributed to her. However, his siblings will no longer receive any share. There were many suspicious points in the will, so the relatives indicated that they would contest it in court. And as of 2021, Mr. Tanabe and his relatives are still continuing their dispute over the deliberation of the will. The identity of the perpetrator and the whereabouts of the large inheritance remain shrouded in mystery in this case. But who exactly was the Don Juan of Kishu in the first place? From here, let's look back on his life and reflect on it. Born to a family operating a liquor store in Tanabe City, Wakayama Prefecture, Kondo graduated from junior high school. He started various businesses, such as selling Kondo's sake, and every one of them was a success. His name appeared on the top earners list every year in the 1990s. Did he have a talent for business? Or was there some other driving force behind his ambition? He had a reason for making money. He made money to be with women. He backed up his words by paying women 300,000 or 400,000 yen each time. He thanked them with money and had relationships with many women. He became instantly famous because of his relationship then. It was the incident where he had about 60 million yen worth of money and goods stolen by a woman. During a television interview, he claimed to have spent 3 billion yen on 4,000 beautiful women. He became a hot topic as the Don Juan of Wakayama. By the way, Don Juan is a legendary playboy from 17th century Spain, and about 3 months before this incident occurred, he got married for the 3rd time. His partner, Ms. S, was a model 55 years his junior. Ms. S was born in Sapporo, Hokkaido, and after graduating from high school, she attended a beauty school. After that, Ms. S registered with a dating club in Tokyo, where she met him. He fell in love with Ms. S at first sight, and after pursuing her, gave her a monthly allowance of 1 million yen. He offered the condition that she could travel back and forth between Tokyo and Tanabe. That led to their marriage. But just 3 months later, he was murdered, and suspicion fell on Ms. S. As I mentioned earlier, there were no signs of an intruder in the house. Only Ms. S and the housekeeper were in the house. And since she would inherit a huge fortune, it's no wonder Ms. S became a suspect. Employees at his company testified that Ms. S disliked him. Due to his illness, he soiled his diaper with urine and feces, and she didn't want to live with him. She often went back to Tokyo claiming modeling work. That's right, but Mr. S denied it, saying she never did that with him before marriage. He was already unable to do it anymore. She claimed they married only as partners and insisted she'd never kill him. The police thoroughly investigated Mr. S's surroundings, but no evidence connected to the case was found. And then there was one more person at the house, Ms. Kasafu. This person was involved with him in the Shirahama Resort Development Project and was listed as a company director, so it can't be said that she was just a housekeeper and employer. Relationship. This president felt indebted to me, so I told people around me that I would receive 40 million yen if the president passed away, that we had a long-standing relationship, that I was in charge of cleaning and preparing meals. And then her ex-husband was involved with drug use. Because he had a history of arrests, the police also investigated him as a suspect, but no evidence was found. In this way, the investigation stalled. But at the beginning of 2020, there was a major breakthrough in the case. Amazingly, methamphetamine was detected in the vacuum cleaner found at his home. As a result, Mr. S and the housekeeper were questioned again, but unfortunately, this did not lead to solving the case. Then, in June 2020, while the investigation was making no progress, Mr. S was suddenly criminally charged with fraud. Why? Because Mr. S ran a business. He was the sole representative director from his company, Apricot. At the extraordinary shareholders meeting, he received the attendance and approval of the temporary participants. Ken received the approval to stand and participate, and can also receive the attendance and approval to stand and participate. Ken attended the meeting. At the very least, it is certain that Mr. S got a large sum of money. In 2021, nearly 3 years after this incident occurred. Currently, the police should be investigating him, taking into account the dark money involved, but still, no evidence has been found. Various speculations are spreading on their own. I hope the truth of this case comes out soon. That's all for today. Thank you for watching. Thank you very much. In life, there are things that are hard to let go of. You have to choose one of two things and give up the other. There are times when you have to make what's called the ultimate choice, which is often brought up. A well-known example is the question, if your mother and your lover were both drowning, who would you save? There's a similar story called the Carneades plank. The ship they were on was wrecked, and they were left floating. Clinging to a wooden branch and drifting, they called for help. Another passenger approached and desperately tried to cling to the plank, but this wooden plank didn't have enough buoyancy to keep two people afloat. To save himself, he pushed another passenger away, so only he survived. This is the story I want everyone to consider. What if the person clinging to that plank was someone important to you? That's what I want you to think about. This time, someone more important to me than my own life comes first. This is about a brave high school student who risked everything to answer that question. I hope this brings resolution. Here are the details. Kobe City, Kita Ward. Male high school student murder. Around 10:50 p.m. on October 4th, 2010 in Kita Ward, Kobe City, Hyogo Prefecture. Shota Tsuizumi, a second-year high schooler, met his girlfriend on a street in Tsukushigaoka. At the time, the 16-year-old was stabbed and killed by someone. Now, in 2020, about 9.5 years have passed since the incident. The perpetrator is still at large, and the case remains unsolved. Shota and his girlfriend were sitting next to a vending machine, enjoying a conversation as a couple. Suddenly, when his girlfriend looked up, she noticed a young man watching them from a pillar about 10 meters away. That guy is kind of creepy, isn't he? When his girlfriend said that, Shota replied, "Yeah, you're right." Right after that, the man silently stood up and started approaching the two of them. Looking closely, you could see a small knife gripped in his hand. "Run!" Shota shouted, and she ran desperately. A few minutes later, when she returned, she was about 70 meters away from the vending machine. At the intersection, Shota lay on the ground, covered in blood. Shota was already unconscious and was immediately taken to the hospital, but was soon pronounced dead. Multiple stab wounds on his head and neck clearly showed intent to kill. The police quickly started their investigation. There was no evidence Shota was robbed or had relationship issues. Witnesses only noted the time and the quiet residential area. There was absolutely nothing to go on. However, that doesn't mean there were no clues at all. About a week after the incident, a knife believed to be the murder weapon was found in a gutter about 100 meters southwest of the scene. Above all, regarding her testimony and the knife found, investigation headquarters said this location was checked immediately after the incident. At that time, it was not found. And unfortunately, no bloodstains or fingerprints were detected. In other words, it is believed that the culprit took it home for a while, washed off any fingerprints or bloodstains, and then discarded it. The investigation headquarters conducted interviews with a total of 14,000 people based on her testimony. The man was about 30, 160-170 centimeter tall, slightly overweight, with thick eyebrows and narrow eyes. He also had distinctive features like wavy hair that stuck outwards. That's what she said. A composite sketch of the suspect was released 2 years later, and a knife thought to be the weapon was found to have been sold at a nearby discount store. Earlier, the last person to buy a knife at this discount store was wearing them. The pants were made public, and a special investigation reward was offered, but it did not result in the suspect's arrest. No valuable information has been found. Mr. San was the youngest of 3, with an older sister and brother. His father, Satoshi, says that he was a child who would chat about anything with his family in the living room and entertain everyone around him with his cheerful personality. Since he disappeared, it feels as if the light has gone out of our home. The next day, reporters crowded the family, and despite their grief, some insensitively asked, "How do you feel right now?" That's right. The investigation stalled for a long time, and the media only worsened the family's grief. Amid all this, the family searched the internet for any clue. They looked for information on major forums and on Kota-san's blog. However, there were many unbelievable things written there. He deserved to die. That's the fate of a delinquent. This was used when the news reported it. There were questions about the time when the incident involving Mr. Name and the photo booth happened. People also pointed out that he had dyed his hair. Because of her age, there were many heartless insults written about her. Those things were truly painful for the family. Satoshi-san says, "My son was killed." Oh, do we really have to endure such baseless slander? However, it wasn't only sad things. The day after the incident, more than 300 classmates visited the house to say their final goodbyes to Kota-san. Some friends tearfully shared their memories of Kota-san. Stories circulated about him breaking up fights and climbing trees in the park, along with videos friends took on their phones. Satoshi-san said he was comforted by seeing his son living on in the hearts of his friends. At the same time, he renewed his strong determination to catch the perpetrator no matter what. He didn't just leave it to the police. He made his own flyers. With the help of his classmates, he distributed the flyers around the scene. While feeling grateful to those classmates who helped, sometimes seeing them makes him wonder painfully what it would have been like if Tai were still alive. Police are still investigating with a team of over 20 and believe this was a random crime. Since the suspect always carried a knife and got rid of it about a week later near the scene, it's almost certain the crime was committed by someone living in the area then. About 10 years have passed since the incident, and the suspect may not still be living nearby, but I will not stop hoping that the criminal will be arrested as soon as possible. I want the truth and hope the family's wishes are fulfilled, and I sincerely pray for Mr. Risol to rest in peace. Thank you very much for watching.